After revisiting Cyril Gane's previous fights and studying them for my upcoming breakdown videos, I couldn't help but notice one frustrating element in his game, which I would be able to consider a weakness, especially for a fighter in the heavyweight division. But before we dive into that, be sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel with the bell notification turned on. If you are also interested in joining my Discord server, the link for that is in the description below. His weakness would be his stance in my opinion. To call it a weakness is pretty big, but just try and follow what I'm saying here. In comparison to his entire skill set, which is very complete alongside with him having massive size, it is really essentially nitpicking the details of his game. Okay, so now why his fighting stance? Cyril Gane tends to rely too much on switching his stances to throw a power straight right hand. Whenever I see a fighter switching stance in order to connect with their quote-unquote big blow, it is immediately a sign that gives away that they are not in their natural stance. They are in their learned stance. Now, before we dive into this whole debate of should a fighter who is, for example, right hand dominant fight with his right hand forward or backwards is an entire different debate. But in this video, I am specifically talking about the lack of power Cyril Gane has in his left straight when he's fighting out of the southpaw stance. So when I kept seeing Gane switching abruptly to orthodox to throw a potential fight and the right hand, in my eyes this was a very big inconvenience in his skill set. He's a fighter who is able to control his opponents, move out of the way, low kick, deep kick, go to the body, burst a few strikes and then slip out of the way again, really focusing on defense, really not trying to get hit as his coach has been training him over these last couple of years. But with that, there is a big element of pacifism, a lack of ability to stand his ground and sit on his strikes and go for a potential fight ender. Now, the big emphasis I am putting here is the ability to have a fight ending chance against Francis Ngannou, because he has that at every second of the fight. If this was another opponent Cyril Gane would be facing right now, if it was Jon Jones or Stipe Miocic, I would not even be talking about any of this, because against them it is pretty much irrelevant. Because against Jon Jones or Stipe Miocic, he's not going to be in this type of a dangerous fight against a mutant of a man weighing in at 264 pounds of solid lean muscle tissue. Cyril Gane weighs about 240, 250 pounds, so they're not that much different in size, but the opponents that Cyril Gane has faced, they're nothing in comparison to Francis Ngannou, and that is what I'm trying to point at. Let us take a closer look at his fight with Alexander Volkov, for example, which really highlighted this big issue that I saw in him. As soon as the fight was entering the later stages where he was pretty much in complete control, you saw a very gun-shy Cyril Gane. When you have an opponent up against the fence like that, most of the time in the heavyweight division, that is when they go ahead and try to look for the final blow. This is not something that is, the go-to. Cyril Gane being patient is exactly what he should be able to do. He should be able to stay patient. He should be able to be 5 steps ahead of his opponents, not get touched, and go ahead and win the fight convincingly without taking any unnecessary risks. I understand that. My worry is that against Francis Ngannou, I do not see him immediately coming forward and controlling the tempo, the range, and being the ring general. And that is where I see the problem of him having enough power in his punches coming into play. Cyril Gane is a tremendous fighter. He has great footwork that has pretty much never been seen in the heavyweight division, excellent fluid kicking to the legs, to the body, and his ability to mix his punches not only to the head, but also to the body very often. And so with his footwork, distance management, and diverse output, he has been able to keep his opponents in a permanent state of paralysis by analysis. And that is exactly my biggest worry for him. Him being a pacifist style fighter with the best technical fighting ability in the division, I am simply wondering if the sheer size, strength, patience, and overall knockout threat of Francis Ngannou is going to be intercepting with his methods of controlling him. If he's not able to control him, he should be able to go ahead and knock Francis Ngannou out to even the playing field. But that is exactly where the problem is, and that is exactly where I think the weakness is. Because if Cyril Gane wants to go ahead and throw his big, massive, looping right overhand power punch, more often than not, I believe Francis Ngannou is going to see it coming. And if he decides to commit to his left straight, I believe that Francis Ngannou is strong enough physically to take the hit, and not only take the hit, give one back even bigger. And so then you are going to be going punch for punch with Francis Ngannou. And is that really what you want? It's a risky game. But luckily for him, he's not a small heavyweight. He's pretty big. He's pretty much the same size, so he's not going to be getting weight bullied in there. It's not going to be like Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou, in my opinion. Now, there is one comparison I would like to make between Cyril Gane and the middleweight champion Stylebender Adesanya. I would say that Gane is a heavyweight version of Adesanya, but only a little bit more primitive. But in a division as shallow as the heavyweight division, it is not difficult to stand out as a striking technician when the entire competition is either filled with over-the-hill fighters of the early 2010s or low-tier short-stint fighters who are being used as highlight reels. And Gane, on the other hand, is equally as good in the medium range in the middle of the octagon, but he's even better when he's having full dominance and coming forward and maintaining the opponent up against the fence. That is what he likes. But Gane also knows that he's fighting much bigger opponents who carry a much bigger knockout threat than any of Israel Adesanya's opponents. So even though that we can see the tendencies and the methods that work with Israel Adesanya work with Cyril Gane against most of his opponents, I find it pretty hard to imagine that most of his tricks will be having the same effectiveness against Francis Ngannou, who was such a wild beast to get a control of. This is not the same Francis Ngannou who fought Stipe Miocic for the first time. He's a much different fighter now. Another area where I can draw a difference in their similarities is that when it comes to stance switching, both play it differently. Adesanya, in his neutral orthodox stance, he boxes more, and then when he switches to southpaw, he starts to kick more. Now with Adesanya, orthodox is both neutral and natural, but with Gane, his neutral stance is southpaw. But in my opinion, I think it is orthodox. However, when he is in his southpaw stance, Gane is a side kicker to the knee. He throws a lot of teep kicks, a lot of intercepting shots to the body like a knee. He likes to throw his jabs a lot more. But as soon as he switches, more often than not, you will see him sit down on his right hand a lot more, which really indicates to me that that is his more powerful straight punch. His left hand, on the other hand, it lacks great power. This does not mean that he hasn't stopped his opponents. Far from it. He's got stoppages over Dos Santos and Derek Lewis most notably, but stoppages at that, not knockouts. And that is a big difference between the two, and a pretty important difference at that. A lot of people go ahead and talk about Ngannou's fight with Derek Lewis. It was not an entertaining fight because we always expect Ngannou to go in there and completely shatter the opponent. But if you take a look at most of Francis Ngannou's big one-hit knockouts, most of them come when the opponent is already throwing first and he's able to slip out of the way and come back with a big counter or intercept quickly. Along those lines, rarely will Francis Ngannou really create that big opening by coming forward and really forcing it. Early on, he tried it against Stipe Miocic. He clearly did not have any success. Then later in the second fight, you saw him being a little bit more patient and be a little bit more cerebral with his shot selection. But in general, Ngannou is not as wild as he thinks. And when he was fighting Derek Lewis, he knew that Derek Lewis was carrying a great knockout threat as well. That is why the fight was such a stalemate. I don't believe Francis Ngannou is going to have the same worries that he had against Derek Lewis against Cyril Gane. Just the same way that Jan Blachowicz did not have the same worries that he did fighting Israel Adesanya. Francis Ngannou is a much harder fight than any opponent Cyril Gane has faced. Ngannou is the champion for a reason. Against Ngannou, it will be the first time that Cyril Gane will not be in control of the center of the octagon. Most of Gane's game really comes down to him being able to control the tempo and range. Defensively, he's reliant on his footwork, and most of his opponents have not been able to take away his mobility by going ahead and kicking the legs successfully. An area where Ngannou has made improvements in is exactly that, going to the legs, which he has shown against Stipe Miocic. Now, does this mean that he's as good of a kicker as Gane is? No, but he doesn't need to be. What he needs is to stand his ground and really set in those big, heavy leg kicks. Because there have been opponents that tried to kick Cyril Gane, obviously. Alexander Volkov landed a good amount of kicks, but he lacked the power and commitment to standing his ground and really sitting in on those big kicks. This gave away a lot of ground and got himself on the back foot, where his kicks would not penetrate as hard going backwards as they would have coming forward. Not to mention that, Ngannou will be heavier and stronger than Gane. His size and come forward style will make the cautious Gane even more cautious. And I fail to see Gane fighting as good as he does coming forward going backwards. That is one area Israel Adesanya truly outshines him in. And aside from that, when you're being backed up by Francis Ngannou, the nervousness starts to kick in, as this is not sparring anymore, and a single hit can change everything in an instant. And that looming threat is serious. Ngannou has improved ever since his first loss to Miocic. That is pretty clear. And he has become very patient and a smarter fighter with his skills, utilizing debilitating leg kicks and sound boxing setups to break through the guard of the opponent and connect on the chin and knock them out. Now, I do not doubt the superior overall striking game, grappling game that Cyril Gane has that truly outmatches the game of Francis Ngannou on a technical level. But the idea that Francis Ngannou is going to be totally outmatched in the striking game because Gane is more versatile, has cleaner technique, more experience, is in my opinion irrational. You do not have to be the better fighter to beat the better fighter. All you need to do is fight to your strength and make it happen. And Ngannou has made it happen a lot. Francis Ngannou might not fight as pretty as Gane, but he sure has a lot more effectiveness when it comes to finishing his opponents. However, that might be just the ultimate crossroads right now. Even though Ngannou was powerful and patient, he too has not faced an opponent like Cyril Gane. Even though Cyril Gane is very skilled and smart, he has never faced an opponent as dangerous as Francis Ngannou. And just because I have made these points in favor of Francis Ngannou does not mean that I can't make the same amount of good points in favor of Cyril Gane, because I will be making a video talking about why Cyril Gane can beat Francis Ngannou. Ngannou. Gane's skill set alone will trouble Ngannou to an extent that we have not seen before. Gane's very technical. He doesn't carry devastating knockout power, but if Francis Ngannou walks into a big shot and gets countered, he will get hurt. And I am not even mentioning the stamina factor, the grappling factor, and the overall mixing of his fighting game factor, period. This is a way more complicated fight than this one specific area that I focused on in this video. But for now, this was a weakness that I saw in Cyril Gane's game continually reoccurring. Will his lack of convincing punching power fail to demand respect and halt the aggression of Francis Ngannou? Or will he have to rely on his body strikes to slow down the champion? In the end, only time will tell what will truly happen. For now, I have been Keenan from Keenan KTV, signing off. Later.